Ignore the mess behind me. I've got all the stuff from my living room walls and shelves in my studio because I've got painters here this week. Hopefully they do a great job. But I wanted to add this in front of the video that's about to play because we will be talking about the Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni case. We're going to be talking about a lot of things about the case, including the possibility of a summary judgment dismissal, and if that happens, the possibility of an appeal, all the PR moves that Blake Lively's legal team, Ezra Hudson, is pulling to manipulate us and using the court system to do it. Bad idea, because we're a lot smarter now than we used to be about these things. We're talking about, is this actually a SH case, or really is it about retaliation and what all that means? We'll also be touching lightly, but we will touch on the SA and SH topics. So if you're triggered easily, I just wanted to warn you about that beforehand to let you know. But we'll also be touching on, gosh, we talk about so much. Taylor Swift, a little stuff about life, but it's an interesting conversation with Brittney Kay. She's an attorney, and you can find her on TikTok and Instagram at Commit to the Brit. So as the introduction video plays, if you would please stop what you're doing, go to YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, hit subscribe and like at Teresa Better Life. Please leave your comments. I'll read through them and we'll continue the conversation after the video.
You want a better life? Let's make it real. This is a better life. From scars to stars, from pain to bulletproof. Teresa, better life. A better life with you. Talking news, pop culture life, love and scandal, heart to heart. No playing small, we rise, we fall, we laugh, we do it all. A better life is one brave call. Teresa, better life. Let's build a better life. Let's build a better life. A better life. Teresa, better life.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'm so excited to have you here. I watched you on TikTok for the months since I've started doing online stuff, which was, I think, maybe 4 months ago, 5 months ago.
Yeah.
So tell me how you got started doing TikTok.
It's the basic, I was bored during the pandemic, I've never really had an online presence. My Instagram has always just been, look at me hiking with my dogs in the desert. And I got on TikTok and very quickly joined Swift Talk because I'm a huge Taylor Swift fan. Just started making content. And then the Shake It Off copyright infringement suit was going on at that time. And I was seeing a lot of misinformation and just people not really understanding the legal, civil procedure process. So I sort of jumped in and I was like, hey guys, here's how this works. And started just making silly hee hee ha ha content at first. And then, the more people really wanted to hear about my legal advice and opinions, the more I kind of drove my content that way. But I started off just making like videos of me in sequins dancing to Fearless tracks.
Oh, I have to get back. I'm going to go back and look at your older stuff then.
A lot of it is deleted. Yeah.
Oh.
So I'll send it to you. I'll send it to you, or maybe I should upload some of it just to kind of do it then and now. But I never really expected to get a following, or, I really wanted to talk about mental health. I have a background in massage therapy and somatic health, and helping people understand where and how they store their emotions in their bodies. And so that, during the pandemic, everybody was like so stressed. And I just really felt like I had this area of expertise to offer people of like, here's ways to process your stuff. But nobody cared about that content. They wanted to hear the legal stuff, which makes sense. Who wants to talk about their feelings?
Yeah, you're right. I think you definitely get a lot less views on the serious stuff because people, they want to be entertained.
Are you not entertained? Have you been on TikTok for a while?
No, I was on Facebook, and that was about it. I knew Facebook just enough to get around, and everything else I'm learning.
Yeah.
What kind of law do you practice?
So I do general civil lit. I work in a small area, a small town. So, I really try to not limit myself. My biggest focus areas right now have been family law, and then litigation around estates and probate, and, when a family member dies and everybody wants to fight over what remains, or, these vulnerable adult claims are really big where I live. So I do a lot of that, mostly just because it keeps me in the courtroom. So my biggest strengths as a civil litigator are being in the courtroom. So anything that gets me in front of a judge, and that's my passion.
So how did you hear about the Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni case?
I had a friend who was obsessed with the case. She was following everything, watching the YouTube lawyers, and texting me, long tomes about what was going on. So she was kind of keeping me updated. And then when Taylor Swift entered the picture, I saw a lot of misinformation around how, this was just for PR, and, Justin Baldoni had no reason to bring her in other than name recognition. And that's where I was like, okay, guys, as a lawyer, like, you need to know that's not how that works. So that's where I jumped in, and haven't been able to look away since, because this case has just been crazy.
It's crazy.
Some of it is normal fighting between lawyers and fighting over discovery issues, and some of it is like, what in the world is your strategy?
I learned yesterday. So I had made the post about Judge Lyman denying the alternative service for Isabela Ferrer.
Yeah.
And I learned, so then after I heard from the attorneys who said, let's see, I think a little girl attorney, and not actually Golden, had said something. I don't know if you said something about it or not. I think you were busy yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a hearing yesterday and very little sleep. So I was like watching everybody's content and watching what was going on. But I was like, I'm so cranky. So whatever I'm going to say is like not going to be my highest self. It's going to be me just being like, meh. So
yeah. So after they talked, after they said it, they were like, well, it's not over, and they can, do it another way, and they just have to, work harder to do it. It made sense. So I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe then I'll slow down when I see something come on the docket, that I'll just slow down and wait to see from the attorneys, because there's a lot we don't understand, because everything can look like Judge Lyman is biased. Yeah. So what's your take on that? Because to us, from the of course, incoming, supporting Justin, we're going to be extra sensitive. So what's your take as an attorney?
Yeah, so on that specifically, I actually had just gone through a similar process of trying to file a motion for alternative service. And we were asking to serve someone through Facebook, which isn't really allowed in the rules. The rules around service are pretty clear. Like, here are the steps you take. And then if you're unable, you really have to exhaust every mechanism you can. And then once you've done that, you come back to the court and present some alternative, means of serving someone. I will say I find it incredibly unprofessional and nasty that her attorneys seemingly accepted alternative service from Blake, but not from the Wayfarer parties, and now are saying, but you have to pay for all this. So that's just not how indemnification works. If you want to choose an attorney that is hostile to your previous employer, you pay for that then, right? Like that's not how that works. So on her lawyer's part, I was like, come on, that's so, do your job, fight over the actual content of the subpoena. And I think Not Actually Golden said exactly that. Like, really, I looked up the lawyer. I'm not a huge fan of his style, but the overall question of whether the judge is biased, I have moments, right? And a lot of my followers at this point are Baldoni supporters. I think I've either blocked or isolated the Blake Lively supporters, because the longer this goes on, the more I'm like, I was willing to believe her, but I still see no proof of sexual harassment. So there are moments where people will hop into my comments with really astute, smart points about this judge. And he's made some calls that I'm like, come on, bro. Like, the dismissal with prejudice of Justin's claims, I think, was a bridge too far. Some of this discovery stuff, allowing discovery past the point of the complaint, I think is a little silly. So there are moments where I'm like, I see where you guys are coming from. There are moments where I'm like, damn, maybe they're right. Maybe he is bought and paid for. But, so much of it does seem normal from my perspective. I've gotten into discovery fights where I'm like, this isn't even relevant. And the judge is like, I don't care. Let them have it. So there have been moments where I've been sitting in like a Wayfair position where it's like, they shouldn't be allowed to just dig into everything I've ever done in my entire life, or my client's life. Right. But at the end of the day, the judge's biggest concern, every party involved, every person involved is looking out for their best interests. And the judge is doing exactly that. He doesn't want to be overturned on appeal for saying, no, you can't have this document, and that document would have made a difference in the case. So I think that's really his perspective. I guess I'm suspending belief or disbelief at this point and just kind of waiting to see how things fall in summary judgment.
Yeah. So what is summary? Like, how does that work? So once everybody has their discovery in, then they move for the judge to look at it and ask for a summary judgment from him.
Yeah. So it's basically going to the judge. Again, the judge is not weighing the credibility of the evidence. The judge is weighing whether or not there's no argument around how the facts and evidence can be interpreted, right? There's no factual dispute over certain elements or claims, and therefore they can't meet their burden at trial. So there's no point in going to trial. It's a very lengthy, time-consuming, you're presenting all the law and you're presenting pretty much everything that's come in that would be relevant to the claims and saying, there's this text message where Blake Lively says to her friends, I'm just trying to take over this case. Nothing happened. So therefore a jury can't find in her favor. Do I think there's going to be that kind of smoking gun? Probably not. I would imagine those text messages have been deleted on her end if they exist. Right. So, I do believe there's been some spoliation on her end, but allegedly.
That's my opinion.
Don't subpoena me.
Well, especially since allegedly she asked Taylor Swift to do that.
Right. And, this stuff coming out with James Fitushka
Oh, yeah.
kind of makes me feel like there's a little pressure from him. He's unemployed. He's desperate. So, I haven't, like we said, I was a little busy yesterday, so I didn't dive too deep into everything. I read his declaration and then Ezra Hudson's letter, but I'm interested to see what's there. Katie Pope made a video saying, I'm really confused. And when there's this confusion, there's usually more going on. And I think that's a really astute point, because that's kind of my takeaway is like, what is this? What is the point of this? So.
Yeah, I saw that this morning. So James, he's changed his story a few times, and now he's saying he changed it because of the Daily Mail.
Yeah.
And now he's saying that Brian Friedman, lied or misled and all of that. So, and then Ezra responded. I was listening to that this morning while I was getting ready. Who was doing it? Cassidy O'Connell on YouTube.
Yeah.
So she was kind of talking about that. What do you make of that?
You know, my confusion is around those claims were dismissed.
Right. So why are we even talking about it? And then why is she coming in? So that makes me think, so even though, this, I feel like it's all tying in the Isabela Ferrer thing, that all of this is just for PR so that they can come in with their letters and then win over the SEO for a few days of calling Justin and, accusing him of harassment.
And lying.
Because if you just look at the headlines, which a lot of people do, so they're looking at Isabela Ferrer accuses him of harassment. So, somebody else from the set is doing that. And so now James comes out with this. So I think for me, it reeks of a dog and pony show.
100%. Yeah. That the Isabela Ferrer stuff, 100. I read that motion and I was like, or the opposition, and I was like, for what? For what? Beyond PR, for what? And that's it. I think you're absolutely nail on the head. That was for PR. That was for the headlines. That was for the SEO. Now, when you type Justin Baldoni harassment, you're going to get 2 women that have accused him of harassing, behavior. So, as a lawyer, shame on these lawyers for manipulating normal legal processes to sound like they are something they are not, because the public doesn't understand. Lawyers don't understand civil procedure. I'm watching lawyers who don't litigate or who aren't civil litigators, not just in this case, but over and over, they really don't grasp the rules of evidence and the rules of civil procedure. And so they'll say something and I'm like, ooh, that's not quite how it works. So how is the public supposed to understand? And then on top of that, you have these lawyers coming in and saying, well, this is harassment. And it's like trying to serve her.
Right.
Why won't you accept service so they can stop harassing her? If this is so harassing, where are you, bud? Protect your client then. Accept service.
Yeah. So from what you've seen, and I know we still have a lot of evidence. Well, I mean, assuming Blake has evidence and she's just withholding that. To me, there's no case. It sounds like, and it looks like to me, the main thing has been changed to the retaliation. So that's like the leg she's trying to stand on. But as far as the harassment, from what we know, does that constitute harassment?
Yeah, no. None of it is pervasive or severe or, we're looking for ongoing, repeated issues. I made a post early on because this is so triggering for so many people. Look, here are the ways that you respond to workplace harassment. Write stuff down, talk to your friends and family, put stuff in writing. A great parallel is the Kevin Costner case, where this stunt woman is saying, I was exposed without an intimacy coordinator, this really graphic scene that was unscripted, and it traumatized me. And they're saying, well, she was fine with it. She has text messages right away to people saying, is this okay? I feel traumatized. She signed up for therapy right away. She spoke out pretty much right away. And so, that standing up for yourself is really important. I know as women, we're trained to just keep the peace and be silent, but don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't do that. No is a whole damn sentence.
Yeah.
So, but to use the language back at her that she's using at him, right? She's saying sexy and yummy. And, we know that Blake, based on how she's acted in the past, likes to lead sexuality first.
She does.
And I think I have personal thoughts and opinions on that I can put a pin in, but to use that language back at her, if she's so concerned about looking sexy and he's saying this is sexy, okay. And then afterwards, she, this scene was really horrible and he's doing all these things. And then afterwards we have these text messages. We did great today. I loved this. Right. So the things that we've seen that are in writing support his side of, or his version of events.
Yeah.
Thus far.
Yeah. And people say that. So in order to play the other side, because Zach Peter on Just Plain Zach had mentioned, there's a world where, there's stuff going on that we don't know and we're all wrong. So, and that's true. And I've thought about it, and it's a hard thing to say because, you're sticking your neck out in support for Justin, but still for me, and I believe it, but there's that one little part that's like, what if I'm wrong? What if we're wrong? And because, there could be things that we don't know or things that do come to light. And that's kind of scary to put your neck out for somebody and then, have it blow up in your face. But the text, so when I think about it like that, and I think about it from the other perspective of the text going back and forth, to me, growing into my authenticity and saying what I mean and meaning what I say has been a process. Now, there have been times where I've sent people messages or I've said, yeah, that was a great time. And I'm like, I'll never go with them again. I'll never do that again. That was the worst. But to them, I'm like, hey, that was really great. Yeah, let's do it again sometime. See you later. And I don't mean that. So to me, if I look at it from that perspective, and the same with Isabela Ferrer, who had sent really warm messages to Justin as well. And I'm not saying, Justin isn't a wonderful person or anything like that, or that what they said isn't true, but it's possible they were just making nice, right?
Yeah. And I think, first of all, I just want to acknowledge, like, when we learn new information, we change our opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And in the beginning, I didn't know that much about Justin Baldoni or Wayfarer Productions. And I really understood, like, I'm not going to ride for this man. Like, come on. Absolutely not. I don't believe, I was I'm willing to believe Blake with more, but I'm not going to go hard for this man. And the more I learn about these two people, we have to take into account, as the public, right? This doesn't come into court because there's all sorts of character evidence, and there's ways to get character evidence in that we could get into. But from a person who has been studying the way domestic violence and abuse and harassment works for most of my adult life, just in my own trauma recovery and trying to understand these things, we're seeing the pattern recognition of somebody who is abusive and has a history of abuse, and that's not Justin.
Mm-hmm.
And we're seeing over and over the things that are said about Justin is that he's kind, that he listens, that he's respectful. And so I guess if that's how he behaves, it bums me out that these women didn't feel empowered enough to say, I'm not doing that. Whoa, did you just flick some tongue into my mouth? What the hell, man? I, like you, am on the find your authentic self path. I think it's a really important part of my trauma recovery. It's wrapped up into my spirituality, and, the tools of patriarchy or whatever, they are ways of going through the world that we are trained growing up in this culture. And one of them is this right to comfort and fear of open conflict that tend to work together, right? And it makes me even more sad that they felt that they needed to placate to somebody with power in order to, feel like they were getting what they want. So I think it's a good point that, maybe these women were just saying what they thought wanted to be heard in order to keep the peace. And again, I would say, stop keeping the peace.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and Blake wasn't without power. Isabela was, and she had two people to contend with. Well, the set of actors who did, have more experience, but she had Justin, and then with Blake taking over, now she has two people in power that she has to keep happy. It's a bigger, her first, big role, even though it was a minor role.
And it's an interesting, I'm always thinking of, what does this look like at trial? How do we get this evidence in? That's the way my brain is always working, right? So I'm always running things through the filters of the rules of evidence and then how you present this to a jury. And unfortunately for Isabela, if she does get called as a witness, now she's there's a means of kind of backing someone into a corner through cross-exam, where you ask a series of questions and kind of get them to agree to a certain set of rules. And then once they've kind of put themselves into this box of rules, it's a method called the rules of the road. So I didn't just make this up. But yeah, like I'm not any sort of genius. I'm never the smartest person in the room. But so you're telling me that you just tell people who are in power what they want to hear to further your career, right? It's now she's backed herself through this opposition that her lawyer has filed. She's taken the position that I lie to people in power to get what I want, right? I lie, or I, exaggerate the truth, or I suck up to people who I think will give me what I want. And if you can find a way to back her into that corner, I haven't drafted the actual cross because I'm not getting paid for that, but
which I'm guessing they'll do. So you said this to Justin and you didn't mean that. So now here you are with Blake and you're saying that. So, which one is true? I can understand why she doesn't. Yeah. Which one are we getting today? That's what I'd say.
If I were her, I would be pushing Blake's lawyers. I don't want to be a part of this. So you accept that offer that I'm not a part of this. Yeah. I didn't see anything. I didn't see anything. You had me deleting text, whatever's going on behind the scenes. If I were her, I would be pushing so hard to accept that offer that
yeah. Did anybody even respond to that? We haven't even seen anything. And I'm guessing they won't.
It's hard to guess what's going on behind the scenes because the stuff they put on the docket, I'm like, what? You're fighting this? So my hope is there's very serious consideration around that. I mean, I don't think this paints Isabela. I always want to be like Isabel. I don't think this all paints her in the best light. Again, I had predetermined opinions about Blake Lively because of her past and the way she moves through the world. So I'm like, if that's the kind of person you want to align yourself with, then I also don't want to be consuming your content. But she is 25. She's got her own connections, but at the end of the day, she's new. She's looking to build a resume, and her first big break is this dumpster fire of a situation. Right. So I do feel for the girl. She's a grown woman, but but
I mean, but if that's the kind of games you want to play, then those are the consequences too. And you're right. But there is a pattern when you were saying about Justin and Blake, there's a pattern of behavior that we've heard from him. And if there was anybody with things negative to say about Justin, we would have heard it by now.
Oh, it would have so fast.
Yeah, so fast.
Let me put my name in this.
Yeah. And then Blake has a pattern of behavior, and she can go around trying to fake that all she wants in her little, social media blitzes and PR blitzes. But that's the pattern, and we can believe patterns.
Yes, when we talk about abuse, it's always man versus woman, and I think we forget that women can be abusive. And I know that's not popular to say because it's maybe not the majority, and women aren't out here killing their partners at the same rates men are, right? But there is something to be said about we can't control what other people do, but we can control ourselves, and we can choose to move differently, and we can choose to reflect the changes we want to see in our society. And so, I'm not a man. I don't get to speak to men about man issues, right? But I'm a white woman, and I can speak to my people about how we can move differently through the world and change our end of things.
Right. Because when you do that and you're not authentic and you're compromising, you're selling yourself, right? You're selling yourself. It's I don't know, modern day prostitution, I guess. You know what I mean? Yeah. So our external world is a mirror for internally. Whatever is happening for us and as a society internally that we're not looking at, we're going to see it play out externally. Yeah. 100%. And that there was something I keep taking notes because whenever you're saying something, I'm like, okay, I want to get back to that. But so yes, and this is it. This is, to say what you mean and to mean what you say, to be authentic. And one of the things that I love about creators, about seeing you, about seeing the creators on Instagram that I like, on TikTok, on YouTube, is the fact that, a lot, aside from, we have to have some sort of filter, right? We can't just say everything we say or think because then, I mean, who knows? that'd be wild. And it is wild. But, I love the fact that there are people willing to step out and to speak out and to just say it without worrying about what people think, especially women, because we have for so long been programmed to not, to sit back and to not stand and speak out. That's changing.
Yeah. I mean, choosing, and it is a choice, it sometimes in the moment doesn't feel like a choice, but choosing to act in accordance with how we've been taught to live, right? Staying silent is a great example. Choosing the comfort of the group, choosing, to not create conflict. That's upholding these systems. And so what we're doing is implicitly saying, I agree, I'm opting in, I'm clicking, I accept terms and conditions on this system that on the other hand, or the other side of my mouth, I'm saying, I don't want to live in this system. Well, that has to start with us, right? And conflict, by the way, is not always unhealthy. In fact, it's very healthy. Now, if you're screaming and yelling and pointing fingers and calling names, that's of course not healthy, but conflict is a way to learn how to communicate and deepen your connection with someone. And so, it's very scary to say, I didn't like that. No, I'm not going to do that, especially in the workplace, but it's necessary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you see, I think it's on TikTok. I think I try to post things everywhere. But yeah, I had accepted a job and my boss was unhappy about something. I was 2 weeks into it, on my second week. And she called and she was unhappy and she was yelling. She raised her voice, was demeaning and talking to me in a way that she should never be talking to me. And I quit. I told her about herself and I quit. I'm like, I'm done. And I felt so good because it was one of the first times. I've been alive a while and I've been through conflict and I've been confronted with people not treating me well. And sometimes I'll come back and fight after the fact. But especially when I care about somebody or something, I'm not as quick to, because I'm so stunned. I'm stunned in the moment that I don't know what to say or do. And I freeze. And in that instance, something rose up in me and said, no, I'm not going to do it. I don't care about the title. I don't care about the paycheck. And I don't care about what you think right now. And that's what kicked off my social media.
Good. And now we get to see your beautiful face and hear your input, and the world is the better for it, truly.
Yeah.
And that's exactly, it's scary. What if I lose this job? But also, what if you stay in that job?
Right.
Woof. This person is not going to change.
Yeah.
They feel comfortable, and maybe they will down the line, but is it worth sticking around and sacrificing yourself day in, day out, of taking the abuse, of coming home, of being emotionally drained? For what? For money?
Yeah. Yeah. It takes a lot of work and a lot of time to change. A person just doesn't do it. And if that's how she acted within 2 weeks of knowing me, just barely spending maybe 5 hours at tops with me, imagine.
Yeah, exactly. And in family law, I see that a lot, where people will come to me years later and say, oh, they were always like this. Oh, well, first this and then this, right? We see these escalating patterns of behavior, but because they're in love or because they think no one else will love them or they have nowhere to go. And sometimes that's true.
Yeah.
Or it feels true. How can I sleep on my friends' couches for months on end? I have kids or whatever. There are situations where people can't leave, but, we see over and over people just walking past every red flag. And then they get to this point where it's like, oh my God, now I have to divorce this person. I have 4 kids or, whatever it is. So leaving at that, or at least choosing to speak up, right? I'm going to speak up, and depending on how they respond and how we work through this is how I'm going to choose to stay or leave. And that's not happening. And it only ends up hurting you.
Yeah. So you had said something about on set of sticking a tongue in a mouth. Did you see that video with Blake? So I think it was the hospital scene. I think. And it wasn't the biting the lip one, but they had a close up on her face and it looked like she slipped Justin the tongue. Yes.
Dumb.
Yes. And there wasn't supposed to be any of that. So that will probably come up. I'm hoping. That was delicious. There's some things on here I'm like, ooh, it's so juicy.
I actually didn't know that was standard in Hollywood. I always thought they were just like making out on screen.
Yeah.
So now when I watch movies, I'm like, but their mouths are open. Like, how does muscle memory not take over?
I know. I don't know how to pretend to kiss without the tongue, but she was saying that it shouldn't happen. So the fact that she did it is pretty interesting.
I'll have to go look for that video because that's wild.
And from what it looks like, she had the power in that relationship, and that she had all the power over him, especially then after she came out with the 17-point list.
Yeah. I mean, that was really backing everyone into a corner. Here are the accusations I'm going to make. I'm already making them. I'm putting them in writing.
Yeah.
I'm going to hold hostage the performance I'm supposed to do under our original contract, which, by the way, is a contractual defense. Mm-hmm. If you enter into a contract with someone, I'm going to paint your house. You pay me $10,000. And then I go, hey, even though I painted half your house, I'm actually not going to finish unless you buy me a new truck. Right? That's not how that works. So I think they have a pretty strong defense against some of those basic contractual, obligations. But
Britt, why did you have to use painting as, you know what? I have painters starting on the 25th. They're going I paid half the job up front. Now I'm like, oh my God.
It's the classic law school contract. It's usually you're selling widgets or someone is painting your house. Like, that's always kind of
they better finish.
We will pray that they finish. Yeah.
I'll hire you. I'll hire you if they don't, or if it looks horrible. So you had some tea. What was it? You had found something out. Was it one of these attorneys or the judge? I know one of them was you had mentioned something about it in one of your videos. Was it?
Is it the connection between Blake and Drake?
No, it was some, let's see, Clarence Thomas. Let's see.
Oh, yeah. Sanford Michelson. And I'm really bad with names. This is
me
trying
too.
to
I have to write them down.
I'm in trial and I have like a key of the names because I've had a judge give me one of these when I got a name wrong. So it's an issue, but he makes all these allegations that Justin Baldoni is a harasser. This is how a harasser acts. Harasser this, harasser that. I think somebody counted, he mentioned it, 12 to 16 times, somewhere in there?
Yeah.
So you go to his website and he uses very passive language, which is very intentional, but he helped appoint Clarence Thomas. He was, I guess, a part of the legal team. It's very unclear. I looked for anything more and it's just this half a passive sentence, but he was a part of the legal team that helped appoint Clarence Thomas to the Supreme Court. And I'm just thinking, you need to keep harassment out of your mouth, sir. You never get to mention it again.
Refresh my memory. So is this an attorney?
So this is Isabela Ferrer's attorney.
Okay, yes.
Who's saying harasser this, harasser that. No evidence, no connection to the motion, to the opposition he's filing. And I'm looking at his page and I'm going, oh, now you care about harassment?
When you brought in Clarence Thomas, or you were a part of that. How much do these people work together?
I can't know, but it isn't uncommon for a witness who is friendly to one side be working closely in conjunction with that side. And that's exactly what it sounds like is happening. It sounds like she hired a law firm that's very friendly with Blake and Ryan. I've heard rumblings in the TikTok comment sections that there's a connection between Isabela Ferrer's attorneys and Ryan Reynolds, or maybe Maximum Effort.
Yeah, and then her mom is part of that legal firm. Yeah.
So, it's hard to say, but given this opposition that was filed, seemingly for Blake-friendly PR and Blake-friendly headlines, I have to assume that they are working together. At the very least, they're working together to make Justin's life miserable because he's not accepting service on behalf of his client for the subpoena that he accepted on behalf of, by Blake. So I have to assume that they are working together just based on the language.
Yeah, right. And so like we all joke that maybe Blake wrote it or Ryan wrote it. How much do clients have? What part do they have in writing stuff like that?
Yeah. In my practice, almost nothing.
Okay. You stay out of it.
You don't get to do this. You paid me to do this.
Yeah.
You go sit. And then I always give the clients. So my practice is I will write the brief based on what they've told me, or I'll write, whatever the motion is based on what they've told me. And I send it to them and then we talk about it. And so there will be times where they will say, I don't want to use this language because I don't want to say that about this other person, or I don't actually know that this is true, so I don't want to make this allegation, right? So in letters and in negotiations, I give them a lot more room to help draft, particularly in situations where they're like, I don't want this to become a court case. I don't want this to ruin our relationship. So I will put that language in there. We want to negotiate outside of court because this person still cares about your client or whatever. So there are spaces where I give them opportunity to have input. The odds that they are writing, let me back up. Big firms do not work like that. Big firms will tell their clients that they have a good case when they don't. Not all big firms, not every lawyer. I'm using broad generalizations here, but I have a mutual that actually worked for Gottlieb, and they've given me little nuggets of what that was like. So
tell us. Can you tell us anything?
Basically just he'll tell his clients whatever they want to hear.
Okay.
He's doing it for the bottom line. And and this is all alleged. I've never fact checked this person, but we've been mutuals for a while now, and they're definitely an attorney. So, they try to keep their private information out of TikTok. And then when somebody does that, I'm not the kind of person that's going to breach that. I'm like, okay, you want to stay private? Great.
Yeah.
But yeah, big firms will do a lot. They'll go a lot farther for the bottom line. They'll go a lot farther to build those hours. And so I don't find it completely out of the realm of possibility that they're sending the letters and the oppositions and these motions to Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively, and Ryan Reynolds is giving a red line version back of like, this is what I want it to say. I think that's completely within the realm of possibility. Again, I don't know. It's all alleged. Please don't subpoena me.
Right. Yeah. And so speaking of writing, so the judge in his response saying, no, you can't do alternative service. There was a portion, did you read the whole thing, where he said something, this will have more teeth, if you do this and that. And it was so funny because, so much of that Blake's like without teeth. She's a ball buster without teeth. And so the fact that he put teeth in that, we're like, is that shade? Like, but most likely he's not reading all the stuff.
So I can't remember if it's in the drafts or I actually ended up posting it, but when I was in law school, clerked for a bankruptcy judge, and she had just come off a high profile case. And while she was on that case, she was basically, what is the word I'm looking for? She wasn't consuming mainstream. She wasn't consuming any media. Mm-hmm. So she was like, Hamilton was out at the time and I think touring or something. And she was like, I'm just listening to Hamilton on the way to work. But, so according to the rules of ethics, from what I remember, and it's been, almost a decade since I've ever even looked at the judicial rules of ethics, which are different than just for that of lawyers. But realistically, Lyman is not looking at the news at all right now, or he's, having his wife or someone, a law clerk, and typically the law clerks would be under those same rules. So he would have somebody else saying, can you go through the newspaper and make sure it doesn't mention this case before I open the newspaper up? Or, hey, if I send me the NPR stuff that isn't going to mention this case, or, so there's workarounds for him to access what's going on in the world. But realistically, he's not looking at the news or anything what's going on, nor should he be.
Yeah.
He is. There's a violation there.
So there was something that I thought about this morning. So because what I'm hearing is that a lot of times the clerks read all the stuff and then they maybe summarize it for the judge, and then they give it to him, and then he decides what to do with it. So what happens then when the clerks are biased? So what if the clerks go in with a certain eye and a certain bent, and the things that they think are important are going to be the things? I mean, how do we mitigate that in the whole process?
Yeah, I mean, I've only got the experience with the one judge. I was friends for a long time. I had a Bible study with another judge. And my experience with both of them, both women, by the way, so take that for what it's worth. But my experience with both of them was that their clerks did summarize what their impression was, but the judge always read things as well. So it was, what is the clerk saying? What was my impression? And they would have robust conversation in chambers about what they're seeing and what's going on. There really is no way to, everybody has a bias. Right. Mm-hmm. This idea that there's unbiased news, that that's a lie. Yeah. People think bias is, you can present information that really slants towards your bias, and that's a problem, but everybody's going to have a certain eye. And so there's really no way to fully remove that from how you're going to see this case. And their bias may not even be, I like Blake Lively. Their bias might be, somebody sexually harassed me back in the day, and this is triggering for me. Mm-hmm. Right. So there's really no controlling for that. Ideally, the control is you either have more than one clerk, or the clerk and the judge are talking about it and they're both figuring out what's important here, right? I mean, the more voices you have in the conversation, the more you're going to come to some sort of reasonable decision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, there is a chance, but again, if it's a high profile case, the clerks also should not be online looking at the Hollywood Reporter, seeing what they're saying about the case, but maybe they are. I don't know.
How many hours do you think so far the judge has put into reading?
Hundreds of hours.
That's crazy. Like go ahead.
Yeah. It's obnoxious. Every judge I've ever seen kind of show their cards as to what they're thinking, it's always around these discovery disputes. It's always this figure it out. It almost feels like mom or dad scolding the kids, I am not going to play referee on this. Figure it out. Right. And of course he is the referee, so that's his job. But I think we looked at one point, this man has 20 some other cases. I mean, he has so many cases on his docket, and every single week, Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni, Blake Lively versus Wayfarer, Blake Lively versus Wayfarer. I took a screenshot one day, and it was 10 email notifications from court listener. And I just was I can't imagine being the judge and being come on, grow up.
Yeah. Which was surprising. He had given that order and reprimanded Wayfair, the attorneys, for using the briefs and the motions. I'm going to have to ask you to tell me which each of those is. But for PR, which Ferrer clearly, I mean, it's pretty obvious to me they used it as a chance to pounce like that. And then he didn't come back and say, knock it off. But he doesn't do that unless the other side asks, from what I understand.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said about, so a motion is you're moving the court to do something, right? Okay. I'm motioning this court to strike. I'm motioning this court to, compel. I'm motioning this court to quash a subpoena. Whereas a brief is you're briefing the legal issues around something.
Okay.
Right. So you're kind of explaining, and those, as an aside, are my favorite thing to write. So exploring a legal issue is chef's kiss, so fun. But because you get to really dive deep into an issue, and you're I'm becoming an expert in this thing.
Yeah.
That's really where the people who are the judge is corrupt, I don't go that far, just to be really clear. But the moments where I'm are the moments where he's stop using the docket for PR. And I'm come on, man, you see what's going on.
Right.
You're smarter than that. If you're going to scold one party, scold them both.
Right.
And this is your opportunity to make the scold. There was an order that was issued, I think, around Perez Hilton's filings, where he was knock this shit off on my docket.
Right, yeah,
he was and it felt like that was the moment where he really took the opportunity to say, I'm not into any of this. And I think there is something to be said about credibility with the court. And, you know, what we're seeing is him responding to what he's being moved to respond to. And typically those motions are being filed by Lively's side. There is something to be said about them coming and being like, they're doing it for PR. You know, and they're clearly doing stuff for PR. And the other side isn't making motions about it, but the judge is still taking that in.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a certain credibility factor that I think they're not really considering, that I hope hurts them in the long run.
Yeah.
But time will tell.
How do you see this playing out?
I think we're going to get a really strong, based on what we've seen so far, I think we get motions for summary judgment. They're called cross motions for summary judgment. So, you know, one party will file, maybe another party will file, and we'll consider them both. And then, so when you make a motion to the court, when you move for summary judgment, the other party gets a chance to respond, and the movant always gets the last word. In the same way, you know, criminal cases work, the prosecution goes first, the defense, then the prosecution gets the last word. Same thing in a civil case. Plaintiff moves, they respond, you get the last word. So we'll get these motions for summary judgment. Both parties will respond. Both parties will reply in support of their motion. So that will be quite a few weeks. And based on what we've seen so far, if there's no real smoking gun, I think we'll get a dismissal. And then I think we'll get an appeal on that dismissal. So I think that Justin Baldoni, I've wondered, like, why aren't they doing more? Why aren't they moving to strike? Why aren't they making these procedural motions? And I really think what they're doing is saving what they have for appeal, because appeals are very costly. So I think that's the way it'll go. You know, realistically, on appeal, there may be a remand, meaning the appeals court says, actually, there is a genuine issue of fact here around certain claims, which is the motion for summary judgment standard. There's no genuine issue of any material fact, and this can't go to trial, right? So I think the appeals court may say, actually, this does need to be tried. But I think it really comes down to this 17-point list. Little Girl Attorney has talked a lot about the alleged complaint that was made back in May of 2023. Under California law, is time barred by the time she files her complaint in December of 2024. So if that's the sexual harassment complaint, she's barred from bringing those claims. And so now the question is the 17-point list, even though the lawyers specifically said this is in lieu of a sexual harassment investigation, if everybody signs, we'll go back to work, there are no issues here. I think they cut themselves off at the knees then of saying, this is protected activity, right? This isn't a sexual harassment complaint, according to her own lawyers. So if this isn't protected activity, how can they be retaliating against protected activity that never took place? There's also the issue of, you know, the alleged retaliation is the smear campaign, which was the internet seemingly just not enjoying Blake Lively for being Blake Lively. And, you know, there is some misogyny in that. I will absolutely admit, you know, we love to pile on a woman. It's unfortunate. But it happened, and don't be tone deaf around domestic violence, and maybe other women won't hate you. Like,
yeah,
you know, and Black women, from my perspective, every time she's come out with a project have been like, hey, Antebellum wedding and clothing line, like, don't forget that this exists. So, you know, some of the conversation is normal conversation that's had about her. But all that to say, the smear campaign happens. But now we have proof that that smear campaign was in response to her smear campaign.
Yeah.
Which is a legitimate reason for them to be going to the press. So that to me doesn't speak to retaliation. So I think the question, if everything we know now is pretty much the basis of what is there, right, is kind of the big smoking guns, I think there's solid ground for Wayfarer parties to dismiss. To get dismissal on summary judgment, I think the issue on the appeals court then becomes, is a smear campaign retaliation, even though it's in response to her smear campaign. So I'm interested to see, this will set precedents if it gets appealed, right? If the appellate court says, no, there's something here, that sets precedents. And hopefully it shapes Hollywood for the better, because this is crazy behavior.
That's what's exciting to me, is that things could really this is a big game changer for, I think, a lot of different laws. How do you feel about that?
About the one-sidedness of 47.1?
Yeah.
You know, I really go back and forth. I think I understand the intent, and I think the intent behind the legislation was really beautiful, and the right moves forward. But at the end of the day, to just say that you no longer have a defamation claim because somebody complained about sexual harassment, if this case is what the Baldoni side and the supporters think it is, which is somebody making up sexual harassment for the sake of gaining power and for the sake of not liking internet conversations about herself, right? If this case is that, then we're seeing the pitfalls of these protective laws. Now, he didn't decide the dismissal based on 47.1.
Yeah.
Right. It was I think it was Rule 47. So the initial rule. But there's a question to be had there of where do we close these loopholes where somebody can bring a complaint, work with the New York Times through doctored text messages. And the New York Times had more information, and they chose to publish her side of the story without any follow-up as to, you know, this is what she's claiming in court. We've seen the text messages. There's some questions around, you know, there's some context here that doesn't quite support her claims. You know, there could have been a sentence at the end. Text messages call into question some, you know, maybe soften it up a little bit, but the robust conversations show that, you know, maybe it wasn't as pervasive as or severe as she's making it out to be. I mean, there could have been some sort of disclaimer at the end. Justin Baldoni has yet to respond. You know, the New York Times is in possession of more text messages and there's more context to this. Something.
Yeah.
And to me, that speaks to where is your journalistic integrity? I'm like, where's the robust questioning here? Did that happen? You know, are they going to Blake and saying, yeah, but what about this text message where you're saying sexy over and over to him? What about this text message where, you know, it gives more context and that, you know, you invited him into your trailer when you were breastfeeding? What about that? Right? What did that happen? Or did they just take her complaint at face value, discard anything that wasn't an exhibit and move on?
Yeah. Yeah.
But the Rule 47 stuff, I think I'm struggling. You know, it's not my state law either. I don't practice under those laws. So I'm not as familiar with it. But I will say I'm torn. I don't think somebody should be able to bring a lawsuit, run to the New York Times, and then just get away with it, you know, just
right.
Especially if that's not the whole story.
Right. And at the very least, if you bring a sexual harassment lawsuit, you can't go to the press. You can't advertise it. Like at the very least, you don't go to the press. I mean, the very least, but I obviously, I hear you say that you have some recovery. I think, is it around these issues, and the same me. I mean, and recovery, like thank goodness. So I feel like for so many years for me, so I was a person who reported abuse and wasn't believed, and it was later, found out that I was, telling the truth. Also, somebody who has been through sexual assault and I was drugged in a bar, and I didn't even remember it until a triggering event many years later. Something happened and it triggered my memory of that event. So as a person who has experienced stuff like that, I do want protections, but I also can see the harm that can come from evil people wanting to make false claims to hurt another person. Before this case, I'm like, yes, the Me Too, protect victims, but he can also be a victim. And like, abusers just tend to manipulate. That's just something that's threaded and weaved through every single thing they say and do. But and if that's the case, then Blake Lively is a master. If that's the case, she's a master because she's been able to do it. Well, and she's admittedly poisoned other people against her castmates. So that 47.1 is hard. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, thank you for sharing all that. I mean, it's, no one ever deserves to be intentionally harmed like that. And the law has not been protective of women. And, knowing that history makes it really hard for me to say, well, how do we carve out safeguards for what seems to be a minority of male victims? Now, I don't know if it's actually a minority. I don't think we have accurate numbers on what abuse looks like from both sides. I just don't. I think that there's some numbers out there that are pretty generally accurate. I made a post at one point saying, in family law, we've blatantly caught women lying, and it seems to track numbers wise pretty well with the statistics. But, the question always becomes, in the law, you have this law protecting people, and you're going to have a minority of people who are going to find loopholes within that system. And how do we stop the loopholes? How do we protect the minority that don't fall into this umbrella? Or how do we protect, the people that aren't going to be covered by this, right? And that's always a question, no matter the law. That's always going to be the question of, where is there protection? Where is that protection lacking? And I think it's an important conversation to have. And I hope that we continue to have conversations like that around laws like 47.1 or anything else, because women deserve protection, but so do men. And men often suffer in silence, because they aren't believed. So,
and they're not taught, I think they're not taught as much as we are about what abuse looks like.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think we still have this pervasive myth that abuse is some drunk, sweaty guy in a trailer and a wife beater with a Bud Light in his hand, just beating on his wife. And it's like, that's not, maybe it gets to that point, but we have this preconceived notion of what abuse is. And it's such a small tip of the iceberg, whereas abuse is so much more than that, especially when you get into mental and emotional abuse. But we do know that abusers tend to manipulate the people around them. And that's something that's really stood out for me in this whole conversation is Blake moves through the world like an abuser.
She does. Yeah.
And I can't ignore that for the sake of saying, well, she's a woman.
Yeah, she very much gives predator. Yeah, very much. And I'll put some resources at the end of the video because we're talking about this. I think it's really important. And I'm fortunate now, after a lot of years, to where for the longest time, I was in survival mode. I mean, years and years and years in survival mode. Then recovery. So then when I started to deal with the stuff, then I was in recovery mode. And now it feels so great to be at this point in my life. And I feel like it's been a process over the past couple of years to get here. And the thing of quitting my job with that boss was pretty much, I feel like, the last thing of like throwing off all of that years of surviving and then recovery to now I feel like I'm just at a point of living. And it's so amazing. And it's so good to be here. How long for you, if you feel comfortable, saying how it's been for you?
Yeah. So I had an incident, or a series of incidents, when I was between the ages of 3 and maybe 5, where my babysitter had a teenage son. And it was something that I always, because it didn't look, my memories were foggy. I was very young. But something had happened, and it's one of my first memories of. So as I go out into the world, I was assaulted by a boss after a party. I got very drunk. He gave me a safe ride home. I'll take you home. And that childhood stuff kept resurfacing, right? And then I'd be like, we're not dealing with that right now. We're going to deal with this.
Yeah.
And so by the time I had an incident happen at work with the boss, it almost, and again, I'm very spiritual, and this is my experience. I don't want anyone to think that my experience has to speak to their experience, but it almost felt like these things were happening for me, and the universe or God or whatever, maybe my ancestors, my dead grandparents, like who knows, but it almost was like, you have to deal with this.
Mm-hmm.
And you're gonna keep getting triggered, and you're gonna keep, having this loss of personal power, victimhood conversation within your psyche until you deal with this. And like you, I lived in survival mode for so long, and I I felt like a victim. Men are doing this to us. And yes, and where is my power? How am I powerful? Where in the world am I a person with privilege, a person with power, right? And so really figuring out where in my body do I feel powerful and how can I move from the world in that space? And so, yeah, for me, it was a lot of like just trying to figure out this narrative of victimhood, survivor, power dynamics, right? And I'm a person that I try to, create a narrative, and I'm constantly trying to get to the nuts and bolts and, well, this happened. And, so my therapist constantly has to be like, and let's come back to your body. Like, I know that you know, and I know you can tell me exactly, I can follow the thread and be like, this connects to that. And so, by the time I was facing a sexual harassment investigation, I had had so much trauma recovery under my belt, and it just felt like I need to move differently. There are a lot of Blake Lively supporters who have been very clearly triggered by this, and the darkness and the shadow and the trauma in me sees and honors the darkness and the shadow and the trauma in them. And oftentimes it's like, I'm not your dumping ground for this, so I will block them, because I'm like, I'm clearly triggering you, so I'm going to do you a favor and just remove myself from your purview, like from your perception, right? You don't need to be engaging with me because it's doing you harm. So I'm going to do you a favor. Also, I tend to pop off. So me popping off at you isn't going to help anybody. Let's just call it a day. But I just want to say that, like, no matter how this case is affecting people, there are ways of moving differently in the world. I think I've said that phrase like 12 times, but like you said, you come to this place of feeling empowered. And I want that for everyone, men, women. I don't think the courts are a good answer for these really complicated questions of power dynamics and relationships. I think it's the best we have. But, I think that the more we step into our own personal power, the more we can see these conversations shifting.
I've had some people, in fact, I was working on doing a podcast with survivors of this. And because of my coverage and supporting Justin the way I have, they backed out of it. They didn't want to do it because they felt, they really felt like you just believe the woman no matter what. And I know that was, and that's fine. But that does concern me with this case when there's been somebody who says they've been, harassed and retaliated against, and then people who don't know, who are just like I was at the very beginning, just believing what she said. And then just, looking at the headlines. If I was a person who just looked at like legacy media headlines and didn't look into this further, I'd still be supporting and believing Blake, I'm sure. So yeah, that concerns me for survivors and victims and that. So, I don't even know how to answer that for them, or even, how to help them. I don't think that's my place necessarily to try to tell them and help them understand my point of view, because they're deeply into how they feel and believe about that. But
when you have this trauma and this huge pain point, right, that's so sensitive, and everything you see in the world just triggers it and pushes into that pain point. It's then you start to see that everywhere. You start to see, it's almost like, again, the world is reflecting back to us what's going on for us internally. And that pain point will be evident everywhere. And as an aside, it's 100%, Blake's initial complaint was 100% believable, because Hollywood is Hollywood. And again, I didn't know anything about Justin Baldoni and his desire to create different stories and to be a different voice in Hollywood. I didn't know that at the time. So I was like, yeah, screw this guy, I believe Blake. But martial arts has been so important in my trauma recovery. Now, it's not going to work for everybody. I'm not saying sign up for a taekwondo class or a kickboxing class and you're going to be healed. There is no healed. There is only healing. But it's been so important to me, because now I can go out into the world, and a little part of me is like, try and victimize me. Please don't. But
right.
Again, it's seeking that, like, where is my own personal power?
Mm-hmm.
And in finding my personal power, it feels less like I identify with the phrase, I am a victim, right? I was victimized. I was subjected to a predator. But at the end of the day, I am not a victim, and I refuse to be that for the rest of my life.
Victimization, and that just gets laminated to a person. And so you have to go in there and be willing to separate from that, because if that's part of your identity and goes with you, has gone with you your whole life, it's really important to say, yeah, I can let go of that. That can keep you safe for a little bit, but not for an extended amount of time. Right. It's not healthy.
I want to focus on the people who are leading with light.
Yeah. So Taylor Swift, are you a Swiftie?
I think that I am. I will say, she's this prolific, incredible writer. I mean, just the way she can, her wordsmithery is really, really, she just has a well-crafted.
That's good. Art. Yeah.
It's really good. Yeah. Are you a Swiftie?
No. Okay. So I like her music. It wasn't until the case and knowing her connection with Blake that I started to pay more attention to her. Oh, actually the Eras tour, I was really impressed with her taking control, taking power and authority over her own life and her records and how it's done, and saying, yeah, I don't need you. I can do this. I love that. I'm like, she's a boss. So I had tremendous respect for what I knew about that. And then obviously more interest when it appears that she's got Blake off. So, there's a reason for it. But my paranoid mind, my do have that side of my mind who's like, I'm suspicious of everybody. But I'm like, what if this is just a game, like to throw us off, and at the end they're all going to pounce in and like go, we told you so. I don't think that's the case, but in my mind that could happen. I should be a writer of movies.
Justin, get this woman a job. So when I say I'm not a fan of the brand, the Blake Lively connection is actually a really good example of that. I've always sort of been like, she built a brand out of female empowerment, and, believing victims was a part of the narrative for a while. And she went through this lawsuit where, she was sued for this man losing his job after he groped her. She countersues for $1. Mm-hmm. Badass, right? I don't need your money, so I'm going to bring my own suit, and my damages are $1 because I have nothing to lose here, right? That was so cool. And then to turn around and be associating with someone like Blake Lively, who's like, well, I don't think Woody Allen is a bad guy. Well, Harvey Weinstein's always been nice to me, right? Yeah. So I've always sort of been like, where's, and people contain multitudes, the relationship they have privately, I'll never know. Maybe that whole relationship was PR. Maybe the text messages they threatened to reveal to the public from 2015 are the reason that they're out. And, maybe there's this thing they've been holding over our head for 10 years. So, we'll never know, but I do know the music that she writes, and that music touches me deep in my soul.
Yeah.
It sounds so hokey, but I'm
That's
like,
good.
She's got some songs out there that I'm like, the album Red has been with me through every single breakup. It's, it's in my car right now. It's in the CD player. It stays in the CD player. So if I'm not listening to NPR Classical, I'm listening to Red.
Wow. Okay. That's good. Yeah. Well, where did you get your name, Commit to the Brit?
I got married in college, and it was a whole thing. We sort of, I was working with this guy, and I was, trying to move out of the dorms and get out of the dorm contracts. And this guy was like, haha, let's just get married. And it became a huge joke with me and my friends. And finally one day we were like, why not? If anybody can walk down to the courthouse and get married, like, why not? So we did it. And I was telling my roommate, back when I started my TikTok page, I was like, I don't really know what to call myself. And she said, that's the most commit to the bit energy I tell her the story, and she's like, misspeaks. And she's like, that's the most commit to the bit energy I've ever heard in my entire life. And I was like, that's my username. Commit to the Brit. Like, I love it. Make a joke, go all the way. So
I knew there was a good story behind that.
And because I'm not good on wordplay or puns or cute little kitschy things, I just stuck with it. So
I love it. I love it. And so we can find you on social media, on TikTok at Commit to the Brit. And is it the same on Instagram?
Yep. Instagram, I have a YouTube page. I don't do anything with it, but I'm going to put all of my Blake Lively content over there so people can watch through it and kind of see the evolution of me going from, I believe Blake, I don't really like this woman, but I believe her, to I'm a huge fan of Justin Baldoni, and now anything Wayfarer Productions puts out, I will watch.
Yeah.
So you can watch my evolution of things, and to kind of call back to what you said earlier, I am still open to having my mind changed. I am always open to having my mind changed about anything. I think that's an important aspect of living life with curiosity. But at this point, I think if there was something out there that would change our minds, we would have seen it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm the same. You need to stay open to the possibility and stay open so that you can receive new information and make informed opinions and decisions on that. But I'm with you too. If there were something, we would have heard or seen it by now for sure. My name, Teresa Better Life. So mine came from, all my life, I strove to have a better life because I didn't come from means. I was on my own from when I was 16 years old, and I was in a dysfunctional, family and all of that. And so my whole life purpose has been to step by step, year over year, to have a better life. And what's that look like? And what's that feel like? And what's it sound like? And so just constantly going, okay, well, what's next level? What's the next step? And so, I think we all, in our own ways want to have a better life, and there's different ways and different steps to get to that. So I was like, what's been something that stuck with me my entire life. And that was like just making a better life. And so that's what I want to be about. And for me, a better life means that I'm speaking and saying the things that I think. And giving my opinions and all of that, even whether it's about spirituality or religion or politics. Right now, it's this, because this is really Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. Like, it's like a full-time job just to even get through what everybody, all of that stuff. So to me, that's living a better life. And so and being more authentic to who I am, good, bad, or indifferent, wrong or right. Just being true to that and letting that be able to have some evolution.
Yeah. I watched several of your videos kind of back to back to back, like right as you kind of came into my purview. And that all comes through in your content. That was the thing that I was really drawn to, is this woman is authentic. You can tell that what you say comes from this really centered place. And I just really want to honor that in you, because it does come through. And so just keep doing what you're doing. Yeah. It's, your story is important. Your perspective is important. And, you and many other people that I've met through this process have really just reminded me to stay true to that North Star, that higher self, that light within us. I feel like I've met so many genuine, authentic people in this Baldoni community. And energetically, I do think like attracts like, and the people that I'm meeting through all of this, just you included, and you especially, have really changed me for the better. Not to quote Wicked, but like a ship pulled from its mooring. But yeah, it's your authenticity does come through, and your desire to live that better life and to be a thought leader, it shows. And so just thank you for what you're putting out into the world, truly.
Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you. That means so much. And I think that, I'm always, like you said, things happen for us, and it's not just about us, right? So this thing that's happening with Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively, it's happening to us too. Yeah. And it's happening for us too. And I can definitely see the blessings that have come out of it, and the richness that can continue to come out of it if we let it be that.
Yeah. Yeah. We can choose to let it drag us down, or we can choose to learn and grow. And this is showing us a lot about how PR works and how Hollywood works. And I've learned so much, there's Chris and Ashley,
Brianna Eve.
Yeah, they're the way their video pops up and I'm like, teach me all the things, right?
Yes.
Because I don't know that much about PR. I mean, I know I had some sort of idea that when we see a celebrity, there's some sort of PR aspect to it, maybe what they're wearing or whatever, but I had no idea how deep that system really runs. And I'm really grateful to have that kind of peek behind the curtain, because these are systems of power. Hollywood is a system of power.
Yeah.
Right. And so learning how it works and learning who the voices are that are trying to change it, to me, has really shaped how I consume media now.
Yeah, knowledge is power, and knowing that, I'm so glad that you said that, because that's one of the things is we have that curtain pull back, and we can see that how many years we've been manipulated and played, and I think that's so important, and it's so good, and I feel like it gives us, that makes our platforms here on social media so much more important.
Yeah, and I want, I love learning, so I'm like, I just want to have a more informed perspective.
Yeah.
Especially when talking about these high profile cases and really understanding, who's pulling the strings behind everything. So it's been really fun to learn, and it's been heartbreaking to see some of the stuff going on. And I really hope that, anyone that's been impacted by this feels like they have somewhere to go that's safe for them to work through that, whether it's Blake and Justin, or whether it's some person, the faceless profile on TikTok. Like, I hope anyone that's impacted by anything, any of these conversations going on, find a safe space.
They needed a life to settle, because life, true life, blossoms there, blossoms there, blossoms there.